Hey everyone, so today we're going to be talking about what happens when life doesn't go to plan. If this is your first time coming to the channel, my name is Donathan. I am a father, entrepreneur, husband, person who just loves life, a giver, and I am so happy to have you here today. If you like my content, please like and subscribe. Would love to see you again. And always, if there's anything that you would like me to discuss or go in further, please don't hesitate to comment. I love sharing my life, my experience, and everything that I have learned along this journey. So today's topic is going to be when life doesn't go according to plan. This happens so often, just in life in general. It doesn't matter if you're an entrepreneur, if you're not an entrepreneur, if you just work a normal job, just in relationships, whatever it may be. There are so many times when life doesn't go according to what we feel it should go. And so the first thing that we're going to look at is how do you know if you failed or if something just didn't work? So this can deal with relationships and this can also deal with business. This could deal with a job that you worked really hard to get and then you get that job and you're like, man, I don't think this is working out. And I think the first thing that we have to acknowledge is not every bad outcome means that we failed. And sometimes, the idea could have been wrong. Maybe the preparation was wrong. Maybe we didn't truly do enough research or understand what we were getting ourselves into. And sometimes it's just a lesson learned, right? It's we're going into something and we are trying to learn and we're trying to learn more about ourselves and we're trying to learn more just about what we like and what we don't like. And so it's just life. And so it's not necessarily that something failed. It's just that you got new experience, you got some new wisdom, and you learn. And hopefully you're able to take something from that situation and move forward. So when should you keep fighting versus accept that it's over? I'm going to specifically speak to entrepreneurship, but I'll also speak to relationships as well. So when I think something is worth fighting for is when I can fully see a vision for it, right? And I know this is going to be cliche because it's one of those things that can also get you in trouble. If I have a vision for something and I can see it working, and maybe you know someone else that got it to work, or somebody in a similar industry got it to work, or even somebody in the same industry that you're in got it to work. This also extends to relationships. You put a lot of time into these relationships. Maybe you really see the good in people, and so you're trying to put as much time and effort into something as you can in the hopes that it's going to work, right? And so you're fighting for it. And so when do you decide that it's over, right? The first thing is how committed have you been in the first place, right? So before something I would say is over, I have to look at myself, right? You should always examine yourself and say, how committed was I going into this? And how committed have I been throughout this entire process? If you have had a high commitment level and it's just not working out and you've been persistent and you feel like you've given it all that you can and you're just tired, you're realizing that the energy and effort that is taking you to continue to move forward is getting harder and harder to put forth and it is just a complete drain on you, it may be time to hang it up because at the end of the day, something not working out is just a part of life. Things aren't going to work out all the time. But the one thing that you want to maintain is your sanity. Because if you don't have your sanity, if your mind's not right, if your body's not healthy, if you're letting things get the best of you and you're not motivated to wake up in the morning and the energy that is required is just not there, you're probably not going to see that thing all the way through. It's probably not going to work at that moment in time. And you need to find something that restores your energy. You need to find something that gets you up again. And you need to find something that doesn't feel like a push and pull every day, right? Push and pull, push and pull. And there'll be some people that may disagree with that, and that's fine. I just believe that there's certain points when you are just going to become drained, when the energy that it's taking to just essentially maintain whatever it is that you created, it's just taking way too much energy, and you're no longer in that creative state. You're no longer in that vision state, and you're no longer really pushing forward. You're really just maintaining. To me, that's when it's time to move on because nothing is changing and nothing's going to change. And you hold on to something that probably is never going to become anything worth having. How do you handle watching a plan you believed in fall apart? This happens all the time. I think this is one of the ideas of entrepreneurship is that you can plan all day, but things are always going to go awry. And in a perfect world, everything that you plan is just going to go the way that you planned it. But unfortunately, we don't live in a perfect world. We live in a world where a lot of times the things that we plan don't go the way that we want them to go. And I mean, an example of this is even if you plan for a vacation, right? So in this time next year, I'm gonna go on a vacation. And the reason I'm picking this specific time next year is because the weather's perfect. It's been sunny. It's a beautiful time of year. There's not too much crowd. Kids maybe are going back to school, so it's not busy wherever I'm thinking about going. Whatever the case may be, right? It's just perfect conditions this time this year. So it makes sense for me to want to plan for next year this same time because I think that it's going to all be the same. And so next year comes around and it's busy, it rains, there's a bunch of traffic, kids got are not in school that day because they decided to, let the kids out of school, right? So you planned based on all the information that you had available to you at the time that this was going to be a perfect plan, this was going to be a perfect date, everything. And what ended up happening is it ended up being a disaster. But you had no idea that it was going to happen like that. You had no idea that a year from now this is what's going to happen. And in entrepreneurship, this happens all the time because you don't know what the economy is going to be like. You don't know what consumer buying habits are going to be like. You don't know what regulations are going to come down the pipeline. You don't know if consumers are, lost interest in a certain product. You don't know if the sales style that consumers used to buy in are no longer buying in. You don't know if the platforms that you're marketing on are going to decide to change their rules or become more difficult to market on. You don't know if costs are going to increase. You don't know if a war is going to happen, right? There's all these things that are always constantly evolving and they're moving. And a lot of times as an entrepreneur, you cannot predict them. And what you do is you try to do your best and you try to, figure out, what can I do in these situations? And I think it's important to have a plan. It's wise to just live without a plan. I think you definitely should have a plan or an idea of what you want to accomplish and what you want to do, but you also have to be flexible. This is one of the most important things about entrepreneurship is being flexible. I don't think a lot of people have that ability to be flexible. They expect things to just go this one way. It has to go that way. And if it doesn't go that way, they want to give up. And one of the things about entrepreneurship is you're constantly adjusting, you're constantly adapting, and it is what it is. And there's nothing that is gonna make it a perfect world for you. And I think that's what separates an entrepreneur from mostly everybody else because everybody else is so used to habits. They're used to predictability. They're used to comfort. They're used to just going in, clocking in. The job is the same. Work is the same. The task I do is the same. And when you're an entrepreneur, every day can be vastly different. The world is constantly evolving around you. Your business is constantly evolving. And so you are constantly evolving. You are constantly changing. And a lot of people don't like to live in that because they look at it as chaos. I don't look at it as chaos. I look at it as growth. And so I'm okay with a plan not going the way that I expect it to because I know I'm going to grow out of that situation. I'm going to learn more about myself, but I'm also going to learn things that maybe I wouldn't have learned ordinarily because it wasn't part of my plan. Does starting over get harder as you get older? That's a tough question. That's a tough question. I believe starting over, I think the expectation of certain milestones in your life, right? You hit 30, you hit 40, you hit 50, you hit 60. I think inherently in society, we've designated where you need to be at those points in time. So I don't know necessarily if it's harder because when you really look at when a lot of wealth is created, it really doesn't start till 50 years old when most people really starting to obtain wealth. So I think for most people, starting over at any age that is 40, 50, 60 years old is incredibly difficult because you had a plan for where you wanted to be financially. You had a plan for what your life would be like. Maybe you had a plan for retirement. And now, if you have to start over again, now all those plans kind of change. And maybe I'm going to have to work till 80. Maybe I'm going to have to work till 70. I think being an entrepreneur makes it easier and many times to start over regardless of what your age is, because you've already probably been through a lot of situations where you had to start over, where you were able to, get out of situations where you're able to rebuild. A lot of times when you rebuild, it's stronger than ever. So, I don't think anybody, especially entrepreneurs, ever want something to fail or want something to stop working. But we know that it's a high probability that it's eventually not going to work as well as it's working today. And so we constantly are evolving. But I will say something about, entrepreneurs who are willing to stick it out as entrepreneurs throughout the journey. They also realize it's a compounding effect. So every time I rebuild, usually there's so much growth that comes out of it. It was worth the rebuild. So I don't really think there's any age where it becomes necessarily harder. I mean, obviously, if you're 80, 70 years old and, there's physical implications of me not being able to do something, that becomes harder if there becomes physical limitations. But mentally, if I have to rebuild at any age, I'm okay doing that because as an entrepreneur, I understand that there's so much growth that comes from it. And there's so many possibilities of me getting further than I did previously And a lot of times in entrepreneurship, you want to hang on to what's working so much that you almost get into a maintenance mode versus a growth mode. And I think it's important for entrepreneurs to have a reset every so often where they go back to the growth mode because that's really where they blossom. That's really where they strive. And that's really where, the endless possibilities of why they got into entrepreneurship really come out. What has failure taught you that success never could? Failure is, I mean, it depends on how you look at failure, right? Failure doesn't have to be this bad thing. Failure can also be, I have gratitude, I have a humbleness. I think you appreciate things a lot more because when people work jobs, I'm never hating on anybody that works a job. If you work a job, that's awesome. But I think as an entrepreneur, you appreciate every little detail, which I don't think as an employee you always can do because somebody else has already built the system, somebody else has already built the infrastructure, somebody else is constantly working on evolving the business to make sure that that business continues to run. Somebody else is responsible for the growth of that business. And so many times as an employee, it's easy to not appreciate all those things. It's easy not to have gratitude and just it becomes an expectation. Hey, if I come to this job, I need to get paid. As an entrepreneur, you're not getting paid every day for what you do. And so I think there's gratitude, there's a humbleness that comes from it. I believe that, anytime, something stops working, it shows you that something doesn't have to work. And I think that's an important lesson that success will never teach you because when something's working, it's like you're in the moment and you're like, I'm excited. All that hard work I put in, I'm excited. This is working. And I'm not going to say it ever is 100% an expectation that it's just going to continue to work. But I don't think when something's working, you look at it as, I hope that this fails, or I want this to fail, or this is going to stop working. I think in the moment, you just are living on a high and you want things to just continue the way that they're continuing because there's so much time where it wasn't working the way it's working. And I think when things start going the other way, it really humbles you to say, man, like that was a moment in time where everything just aligned. I mean, the stars aligned. I mean, when you're an entrepreneur and things work, it's because a lot of times it's because the stars aligned. And you really have to realize that. It's not always that somebody is the smartest person because somebody was harder working. Being an entrepreneur, it's like you're putting in this effort and you're putting in, this time to build something great, but there's so many outside factors that go in to something working and being successful. And I think as an entrepreneur, you have to realize that. And I think that's something that failure would teach you is it's not about just working hard. It's not just about what I know and my knowledge and my effort. There's a lot of factors that go into having something work, and a lot of them are not controllable. And I think one thing that an entrepreneur does is they keep fighting and they keep building until the stars align. And that's to me where entrepreneurs become successful. Now, a lot of people that want to be entrepreneurs, they're not willing to keep going and keep fighting when things are not aligning. And so that's why you look, when they talk about entrepreneurship as such a high failure rate, because it's not just dependent on somebody's effort, knowledge, or experience. There's outside factors that go along with that. And you're essentially building and working and hoping that the stars are going to align for you. And the people who stay in the game the longest are going to get more lucky than the people who choose not to stay around or they have one failure or one upset or things don't go their way and they want to give up. That's just the game. How long are you going to keep playing in the game is eventually what's going to get you to the point that you want to get to, or at least close to it, or at least somewhere else beyond where you're at right now. And the stars really have to align. And so I think one thing is everybody should experience failure and low points in their life. I think that is where we really learn about ourselves. That's really where we learn who we are, how much we can fight, how much we can do, how strong we are, how resilient we are, how much we can figure things out without someone else. So I think failure or just having a really bad downturn in your life, I think it's always good for people because I genuinely think it makes people better. I genuinely think it makes people better. Usually people who are able to get through tough times in their life, they come out on the other side stronger than they were before, more wise than they were before, more knowledgeable than they were before. So I think failure will always teach you more about yourself than success. Now, I think success is going to show people who you are as a person. Success will definitely show who you are more. But I think failure will let you know who you are as a person and what you can do. So I don't think failure automatically makes you stronger. Some people go through failure and learn nothing from it, right? And the value comes from being willing to look at what happened, own your part, change what needs to be changed, and still be willing to try again. So hopefully this message resonates with you. If you are thinking about being an entrepreneur, and you are like, "Hey, I'm going on this journey. I'm excited. I'm scared. I'm nervous." Just know that things are not always going to go your way. There's going to be down times. There's going to be great times. And if you can learn from your down times and you can keep pushing through and fight through those down times, there is a beautiful side on the other side. And just keep fighting. Every day is a fight. Every day is a blessing. Have gratitude. Be humble. And if you enjoyed what you watched here today, I would love for you to like and subscribe. And if you have any comments or anything that you would like me to discuss, I am happy to discuss it. So thank you for watching this video, and hopefully it helped you out with your entrepreneurial or your life journey.